Oh, hey Macy, are we recording this? Because I was going to fumble around with some slides for a second.
Yeah, when I came into the room, it had the recording button on, and I wonder if I can. Allison's the host, and she's not here yet, and so she set it to auto record, but we can. Oh, here's Allison. Hey, Allison, is there a way to stop the recording while everyone's kind of figuring things out?
Yeah, absolutely.
University of She collaborates with Salt Lake Community College faculty and student colleagues on a variety of research and teaching projects aimed at supporting transfer student writers as well as graduate students who aspire to teach writing at access-oriented institutions, which I love that phrase, access-oriented institutions. Some of this work is documented in the book Transfer in an Urban Writing Ecology, Reimagining Community College University Relationships in Composition Studies, which is a key theme here with all of our presentations today. And again, she is joined by current students Tabitha Fay, Katie Henderson, Samantha Kivett, and recently graduated and future law student Derek Woolley. I will now turn it over to Christie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that folks had access to a script version, and also that helps us, keep time and give feedback to each other. But we hope to eventually develop this talk into something that might be able to be included in the WAC Journal forum connected to this event. And so we welcome any feedback that you all have. I left some comments even that we were making back and forth to each other that I thought showed, some of the dialogue going on and might be offer insight for you all. So I want to thank Macy Dunklin, Allison Daniel, Cameron Bushnell, and WAC Journal for the invitation to speak at this conference and for allowing me to co-author and co-present this keynote with community college transfer students. Students are the experts on their own experiences, and I always learn more when we take these opportunities to think and write together. So this collaboration is particularly important given the limitations of my own experiences, perspective, and knowledge. So I'm a 41-year-old white woman who enrolled in a 4-year college directly out of high school and completed a bachelor's degree at age 21. I was a continuing generation college student. My folks were both career military. And the version of English spoken in my home approximated the mythical standard. I didn't become a parent until well into my junior faculty years. And I think I am neurodivergent in ways I'm still figuring out, but I'm otherwise able-bodied, at least for now. There's so much I don't and can't know about the experiences of transfer student writers whose transfer status always intersects with their other identities and experiences. So it's better for everyone that I'm speaking today with Tabitha Fay, Samantha Kivett, Derek Woolley, and Katie Henderson. All of my co-speakers are students in Writing Studies Scholars, which is a support program for Salt Lake Community College students transferring into degree programs in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric Studies at the University of Utah. Launched in 2017, Writing Studies Scholars has been a collaborative undertaking with SLCC writing faculty and many SLCC transfer student co-researchers, co-developers, and co-teachers. Its primary entry point is Writing 3030, Writing Across Locations, which is a free 3-credit upper division summer bridge course that we co-teach at SLCC each summer. Built around a language and literacy autoethnography project, this course explores the ways transfer students' personal identities and experiences can engage and inform scholarship in writing and rhetoric studies. Over the years, this class, particularly the older students who bring their lives, families, and dreams to their writing, have transformed my sense of what our discipline can be. As of spring 2024, Writing Studies Scholars has served more than 150 SLCC students. 80% have transferred to the University of Utah, and 3/4 have earned bachelor's degrees or are on track to do so. 70% of participants are first-generation college students, 66% identify as women or non-binary, and 51% are BIPOC, and over a third of those students are Latine. 43% identify as disabled and or neurodivergent, 36% are multilingual, and 31% identify as LGBTQIA+. The program has an explicit commitment to serving undocumented students and has supported several through to graduation. And important for our conversation today, 53% of Writing Studies scholars have been older than 25 when they joined the program. So in tandem with writing studies scholars, I have also worked with transfer student co-researchers and co-teachers at both SLCC and the university to launch Writing 3020, Write for You. For those of you who are not in Salt Lake, the U loves its U puns. The U is what we sometimes call the university, but transfer students usually aren't quite sick of them yet. So that's what we're writing on with the name. So this is another summer bridge course. Well, we also offer it not just in the summer, but it's a bridge course for transfer students in any major. So we offer a free version of the course at SLCC each summer and a regular section for recently transferred students at the university each fall. The course fulfills the university's upper division communication and writing requirement. In it, students critically investigate discourse and genre conventions in their anticipated career and major discipline. I sometimes think of Writing 3020 as a writing in and against the disciplines course. I'd estimate that about half the students I've taught in Writing 3020 were 25 or older, many of them well into their 30s and 40s. Again, their quote unquote non-traditional college going age almost always intersects with other identities and experiences that have long been marginalized in post-secondary education. So today I want to share some insights from our ongoing work in Salt Lake regarding transfer student writing experiences and possibilities for supporting these students. You can read more about this research and program development in our 2023 book, Transfer in an Urban Writing Ecology, Reimagining Community College-University Relations and Composition Studies. Many of the transfer students involved in researching, writing, and revising the book were in their late 20s and 30s at the time, and their experiences and ideas are woven throughout. And I'd particularly point you to the parts of the book that were written by Kelly Corbray, Joanne Castillo, Kat Allred, and Shauna Edson for direct conversations about age and how that's shaped their experiences. And then after this overview of our research and program development, I'll turn things over to Tabitha, Samantha, Derek, and Katie. So some of you might be wondering why community college transfer students warrant particular attention in a conversation about age and writing in WAC-WID classrooms. Or maybe you're not wondering, but I thought I would frame it anyway in those terms. I think anyone who cares about issues of equity in post-secondary education needs to care about community colleges and their students. There are currently 1,026 public, tribal, and independent tier colleges in the United States. In fall 2022, these institutions enrolled 6.1 million students in credit-bearing courses. Community college students are 38% of U.S. undergraduates. These institutions are a particularly important point of educational access for older students. 35% of community college students are between the ages of 22 and 39, and another 8% are 40 or older. I'd also point out that community colleges are often the sponsors of dual and concurrent enrollment programs, so they also have some of the youngest college students enrolled in writing courses as well. So the average age of community college students is 27. Community colleges enroll 51% of Latina undergraduates, 42% of Asian undergraduates, and 40% of Black undergraduates. They also enroll disproportionately high percentages of Native American students, first-generation college students, and students with disabilities, as well as students who are undocumented, who are or have been incarcerated, or who have been in the foster care system. So if I have one argument to make in this field, it's that community college students also matter for those working at four-year institutions, especially those of us who teach in and/or administer WAC-WID programs. About 80% of community college students say they want to earn a bachelor's degree, but just 32% transfer to a four-year institution within 6 years, and only 16% earn a bachelor's degree in that time. So there's a big gap between what students say they want to get in terms of their degrees and what they're often able to accomplish in the system that we have. And there are racial disparities in these transfer rates. Nationally, 11% of Latina students and 9% of Black students who begin at community colleges eventually complete bachelor's degrees, compared to 19% of white students and 23% of Asian students. So this phenomenon is called the racial transfer gap, and critical higher education scholars like Dimpal Jain, Alfred Herrera, Santiago Bernal, and Daniel Solorzano have called on administrators and faculty at four-year institutions to recognize that we have a shared responsibility to support transfer students, particularly low-income, first-generation, and BIPOC students, by creating what they call a transfer receptive culture. So Jane and colleagues identify 5 elements that contribute to transfer receptive culture at four-year institutions, including establishing transfer of students as an institutional priority, partnering with community colleges to provide pre-transfer outreach, developing dedicated financial and academic support for transfer students, valuing students' lived experiences and the important roles their communities and families play in their education, and creating appropriate assessment frameworks for understanding and advancing transfer student success. So crucially, a transfer receptive culture rejects deficit discourses about transfer students, believing that, quote, students will be successful because they are transfer students who bring valuable academic, experiential, and community knowledges to university campuses. So over the last decade, I've sought to understand how writing factors into the transfer inequities Jane and her colleagues challenge, to consider how my department might contribute to creating a more transfer receptive culture, and to act in collaboration with SLCC faculty, colleagues, and students to cultivate what we took to calling transfer conducive writing ecologies across our institutions and surrounding communities. Although our field has engaged in extensive discussions of writing knowledge transfer over the last decade and a half or so, there's been surprisingly little research focusing on the writing experiences of actual transfer students. The higher ed literature offers evidence that students counter increased expectations for writing after transferring, and that writing plays an important role in their academic experiences. So Eli Goldblatt, this is in our field now, Eli Goldblatt and Jonathan Alexander both observed that some transfer students struggle with upper division writing and note a lack of alignment between community college and university writing curricula. But in different ways, each also suggests that university writing programs should be open to reconsidering their normative values around writing and learn from community college faculty and students. So in the late 90s, actually, my University of Utah colleague, Maureen Matheson, who's herself a writing in the disciplines expert, observed that many transfer students benefit from explicit support, gaining familiarity with disciplinary discourses, and she developed an early writing in the disciplines course for transfer students. Actually, it kind of, when the money for transfer students specifically faded away, this actually became one of our first writing in the disciplines courses. I think it's our writing in the social science classes now. So like our WID history at the U has this connection to transfer students going back to the 90s. But Maureen's observations about transfer students and disciplinarity were prescient. They align with findings from an interview-based study with transfer students across a range of disciplines that we undertook when I was a PhD student at the University of Michigan in the early 2010s. So I was glad to see some folks from the state of Michigan with us today too. So in that study, we identified 5 writing-related transitions that many transfer students, although not all transfer students and not all in the same ways, described experiencing. So one was understanding writing expectations, particularly discipline-specific discourse and genre expectations. Another was adjusting to workload, including increased volume and complexity of discipline-specific reading and writing assignments. Another was navigating instructional differences, particularly in large lecture courses where students might receive writing feedback from people in unfamiliar instructional roles, like course grader or graduate TA. Negotiating peer relationships around writing, and that was a particular challenge for some older students who struggled to connect with classmates who were younger. And the 5th was identifying resources, particularly resources like the Writing Center and library research assistance that many instructors in upper division courses assumed that students already knew about. So Michigan responded to these findings by creating a 1-credit workshop-based studio course that transfer students were invited to take alongside their required WID courses, what they call the upper level writing requirement. So I was working on this study as a graduate student, and we were writing about it and publishing about it in my early junior faculty years. But this was really foundational for me then when I got to the University of Utah. And so at the U, in 2015, we conducted a similar interview-based study with 27 community college transfer students across the disciplines at the University of Utah. They ranged in age from their early 20s to late 40s, and 15 were between the ages of 24 and 30. I conducted half the interviews myself, and the other half were completed by a team of transfer student co-researchers who worked with me to develop the interview protocol and then transcribe and code the data. So here I'll highlight 5 themes from our findings that deepen our understanding of how age can factor into the kinds of transfer transitions we saw at Michigan. So the first is recognizing rhetorical capacities. The transfer students we interviewed were active readers and writers across many different contexts. They all read outside of school for fun, for work, for faith-related activities, for political interests, and for their families. Most wrote for social media and other online activities. Many were avid journal writers, and several were published writers of journalism or fiction. The older students in particular brought years of experience writing across a range of contexts. Several commented on the value of greater experience, maturity, confidence, sense of purpose, or appreciation for learning that came with age. Community college transfer students, particularly older students, are bringing a great deal of, quote, real-world literacy experience to the classroom. Many students spoke highly of their learning experiences at the community college, noting aspects of those experiences that they preferred to what they encountered at the university, including smaller class sizes, an institutional culture that accommodated students' life and work demands, flexible course options and scheduling, parking availability, more approachable instructors, faculty members' connections to the work world, and lower tuition. Many older students, particularly those who were also women and/or BIPOC, indicated that they missed the diversity of their community college classmates. These findings suggest that universities and their faculty, including those teaching in and/or administering WAC-WID programs, stand to learn from community colleges about creating supportive learning conditions for older students. So another theme was transferring writing knowledge. Although we did not set out to research writing knowledge transfer per se, we saw extensive evidence in the interviews that transfer students were carrying forward and adapting writing knowledge from the community college as well as from other areas of their lives. Nearly all remembered specific writing insights or practices they learned in particular courses, assignments, or jobs. Although they rarely used writing studies terminology, nearly all described concepts or practices that might fit into Anne Beaufort's categories of writing process knowledge, rhetorical knowledge, and/or genre knowledge. 16 interviewees described writing in ways that displayed awareness of disciplinarity in academic writing, although we did note that disciplinary awareness was less common in the interviews than some of those other kinds of writing knowledge, which is interesting from a WAC-WID perspective. So given this depth of memory and knowledge, we came to believe that the experience of transfer, of moving across institutions midway through one's post-secondary journey and needing to adapt to the new writing context, might offer a unique opportunity for fostering rhetorical awareness and dexterity. This potential might be particularly powerful among older students who often already have extensive experience transitioning across a range of work, family, and community roles. So a third theme was identifying challenges. To varying degrees, all the writing transitions we identified in the Michigan study also surfaced in our Utah interviews. Those themes included adjusting to an increased reading and writing workload. At Utah, we found this was not simply a matter of, quote, developing better time management strategies. Rather, it was a function of real material constraints, particularly for older students who were juggling work and family responsibilities and hard limits on how much income they could forego in order to focus on school, all during the same semester that their cost of college attendance doubled. For many transfer students, being at the university also entailed longer commutes, more complex childcare logistics, and less flexible scheduling options for required major coursework. 2 students, both women of color, described failing writing-intensive courses during their first semester at the university, and several others described withdrawing from courses during their first semester while they weathered this unexpected initial workload shock. That's the term we ended up using to describe this workload shock. Several older students described feelings of guilt about how their study demands took away from time with their children and/or partners. Oops. So a fourth theme was accessing resources and opportunities. As in the Michigan study, most of the transfer students we interviewed were not accessing Writing Center services, instead preferring to ask instructors, classmates, or other people in their out-of-school social networks for help with writing. And interestingly, the folks that were tapping their out-of-school networks were overwhelmingly asking women in their lives for help with their writing. It's an interesting find. Several were operating from misunderstandings about who the Writing Center served, believing that it was only for quote unquote ESL students or couldn't help them with writing in STEM fields. Clearly, we were not effectively communicating about these services with incoming transfer students. 3 interviewees described having transformative experiences learning to write in their disciplines while working as undergraduate research assistants. However, it seemed that few other transfer students were able to form relationships with faculty that would enable these kinds of opportunities. Furthermore, the structure of the undergraduate research opportunity program at the university, 1 semester appointments for low-paying 10-hour-a-week positions that typically meet during regular business hours, was not accessible for many transfer students. This was particularly true for older students, many of whom needed to maintain jobs that might be less relevant to their long-term goals, but would enable them to pay their bills and support their families for the duration of their time in school. That's a big part of why I've had so many students involved in these projects over the years, is because we could create these flexible opportunities to be engaged in undergraduate research and teaching that didn't have to fit in the parameters of some of the existing opportunities on campus. So the final theme was suggesting change. When we asked what changes the university could make to better support transfer students' writing transitions, many suggestions centered on material support, lower tuition, more access to scholarships, and better parking, all of which would enable transfer students to put more time into their reading and writing assignments. They called for more information about writing resources at transfer orientation and more flexible online writing support. And this was particularly pre-pandemic when we were doing this research, when a lot of those forms of online support didn't yet exist. They wanted more faculty feedback on their writing before and after transfer, more opportunities to read and write in their major discipline prior to transfer, and clear expectations for writing assignments that do not assume students are already familiar with university resources. When we asked for input designing a writing course for transfer students, interviewees suggested that such a course should not be required for all transfer students, but that it should fulfill an actual degree or major requirement. It should focus on students' career or major interests, be small and supportive with an approachable instructor, and help students understand assignment expectations, approach difficult readings, and apply for scholarships. So our two transfer bridge classes, Writing 3020 and Writing 3030, were deeply informed by the capacities, challenges, and desires transfer students expressed in these interviews. Both summer courses are free, with built-in opportunities to find and apply for other campus scholarships. Both take an explicit anti-deficit approach, recognizing and honoring the deep funds of knowledge that students bring through their experiences and communities. Both aim to take advantage of the transfer experience as an opportunity to develop rhetorical dexterity and critical awareness of disciplinarity. We embed community building and opportunities to access university resources, and through the communities we've built, we've sustained one another through the pandemic and pushed for institutional change. In many cases, it has been older transfer students who have pushed the hardest. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tabitha.
Thanks, Christy. Hello, everyone. My name is Tabitha. I'm an undergraduate student majoring in writing and rhetoric studies at the University of Utah. I'm also a first-generation immigrant from Brazil who is also a non-traditional first-generation student, and I just turned 30 last month. So to be honest, I often forget that I'm a first-generation immigrant because I moved here when I was so young. I can pass for a born American because I have no accent, but then I think about my upbringing and the fact that my parents could never help me with my homework growing up because they were struggling to learn a whole new language and culture. I didn't have anyone to help me with my spelling and grammar because my parents were still in the process of learning English. Often they would come to me to correct their writing. I took on this role of writing tutor from a young age, not fully understanding what I was teaching them. I had been raised to never question authority figures, so I didn't. Instead, I learned through trial and error. Over time, I developed a love of reading and writing. I consumed literature like a bag of chips. I remember during high school, a lot of words were thrown around about college, but they didn't mean anything to me. The first time I attended Salt Lake Community College was about a year after graduating high school, and I remember feeling so overwhelmed. The only real passion I had in life was writing, but I had this misconception that the only thing you could do with an English or writing degree was become a teacher. I hadn't been exposed to people with degrees outside of a school setting. So in my mind, I couldn't pursue a degree in writing because I didn't want to be an educator. This meant that I aimlessly took my gen ed classes because I had to, but I didn't have any goal in mind. Nothing was motivating me to get my degree, so I quit. Sorry, I'm nervous. So this was a process that I underwent for about 10 years on and off. In the meantime, I worked hard and I traveled often. Without a degree, I was left working customer service roles. So I worked my way up in the jobs that I had. I became exposed to a different side of business with each promotion. Every job I had, I acquired new writing skills. I learned to communicate effectively to problem solve. I learned how to compose a professional email, and I learned how to give constructive feedback. As I grew, both figuratively and metaphorically, the corporate world didn't seem quite as daunting as it once had. I started to understand the commonalities that every business shared. And with each of my jobs and various roles, I learned what I was good at and what I enjoyed doing. When I made the decision to go back to school, but really go back to school, I recognized the change that had occurred. I was motivated. I had a goal in mind. I wanted to learn and do well, and most importantly, I wanted to do it for myself. In some ways, I excelled in my classes. I knew that my writing was good because I had years of practice. But in other ways, I saw where my education in my childhood had failed me. I saw where being a first-generation immigrant had impeded my learning because I didn't have the additional help and resources that other students had been afforded. I began to do the opposite of what I had been taught, and I started asking questions whenever I was confused. I would seek out additional help from tutors when I felt I needed it. Today, I feel that my writing has not only drastically improved from when I first began my college journey, but I find that it improves with each passing semester. Some of the things that helped me along this journey, or when professors would provide a lot of examples of the type of writing that they expected from me, a breakdown of what they were looking for or what they wanted us to focus on with several examples from previous students. I think it can sometimes be easy for educators to forget that the transition of writing in one genre to another genre can be a difficult process and one that often takes time, especially for non-traditional or first generation students who may have had gaps in their education where the processes could have changed. Rather than focusing on their grammar and punctuation, remember to focus on the substance of their writing. You never know what journey they had to go through just to write it. Thank you. I'm going to turn over to Samantha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I am 32 years young as of next Thursday. A mother of two beautiful girls, 12 and 5. I'm a first-generation undergraduate student at the University of Utah. I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree in writing and rhetoric studies and continuing on to law school when I complete my degree this fall, 2024. Returning to college after a prolonged absence was an entirely new journey for me. It was a stark realization that much of what I was now learning wasn't even on my radar when I graduated from high school back in 2010. However, my life experiences, particularly my time as a regional property manager, coupled with my reliance on writing to navigate that world, had prepared me in ways traditional education couldn't. And as a non-traditional first-generation student, stepping into this unfamiliar environment was both daunting and exhilarating. Starting the daunting task of going back to school when it had been about 9 years since graduating high school was terrifying, but my journey began at Salt Lake Community College, where I was able to graduate with high honors with an AS in Paralegal Studies and AS in General Education, before transferring to the University of Utah. I moved from Seattle, Washington with my family to chase my dreams of becoming an attorney, but leaving a job where I had created security and a steady paycheck was something that gave me a constant panic attack. I knew I wanted to work while going to school because I grew up unhoused and poor for most of my life, so sitting at home and just going to school with 2 kids was not an option for me. One of my amazing professors at Salt Lake Community College nominated me for the opportunity to become a writing fellow for English 1010+ as an embedded tutor after completing the course in fall of 2019. This expanded into me working at Salt Lake Community College's Student Writing and Reading Center, where I found a passion for helping other students come into their power through writing. I have never been much of a writer and reader. Honestly, my friends used to correct my grammar on a regular basis because I used there, and there incorrect all the time. But finding this new passion for helping other students helped me develop my skills as well. Balancing 2 jobs, raising 2 children, and embracing my neurodivergence alongside classmates who were much younger was a unique challenge. Yet through frequent visits to the Writing Center, I discovered a newfound passion for writing. Despite the hustle and bustle of life, I managed my time effectively, utilizing every spare moment for homework, albeit rare. Navigating academia as an older student, I anticipated challenges in finding a compatible community. Late classes and familiar responsibilities left little time for socializing. However, my decade-long journey of independence provided ample material for reflection and storytelling. While others struggled for inspiration, I found abundance in my life experiences. The unwavering support from the Student Writing and Reading Center at Salt Lake Community College and the guidance from understanding professors were invaluable. Their shared experiences resonated deeply, influencing my decision to pursue a bachelor's degree in writing and rhetoric studies, followed by law school. Despite longing to engage more actively in college events and workshops, the timing often clashed with my responsibilities as a parent and employee, leaving me on the sidelines. I was able to connect with a different group of students that often go unseen. The non-traditional students, the English as second language learners, the immigrants, the parents, the confused, the quiet. But what I learned from every single one of them is that they all wanted the same thing, to accomplish their goals and achieve their dreams. Every single one of the students I helped with their writing had a different story to tell, but one so similar to mine. They were seeking to go back and sit in a classroom while taking phone calls from children at school or figuring out that when they will complete homework while juggling jobs and families. I found my people, and these connections mean so much to me, but also motivate me to continue going. Nevertheless, I remain steadfast in my commitment to mastering the craft of writing and staying ahead in my studies, even when faced with disadvantages. School became more than just an academic pursuit. It became my newfound purpose. Motivated by two little girls waiting for me at home, I relocated from Seattle to Utah, seeking support from my family to chase my dreams. The weight of responsibility was palpable, knowing that their futures depended on my success. Every day I remind my daughters that dreams should be daunting, for it's the fear of failure that propels us forward. And so I press on, demonstrating that it's never too late to start afresh and pursue one's aspirations relentlessly. I can't stop. I won't stop. And now I will pass it on to Derek.
All right. Professor Toth, I didn't put slide notes in, so you can just kind of shift through it as I talk. They're not really tied to the narratives. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Woolley. I'm a 33-year-old first-generation low-income disabled student who just graduated with my bachelor's in writing and rhetoric studies with a minor in business management. I'm newly enrolled at the University of Oregon's Law School and will be starting my studies there in the fall. I'm first-generation low-income student who has defied some pretty serious odds to get where I am today. I'm an example of what can be accomplished when a community rises up to support, guide, and educate someone from a very vulnerable population. My journey through life has always been non-traditional. My upbringing was non-traditional. Even my haircut could be considered non-traditional. My trajectory through college has followed suit. After a short and very unsuccessful attempt at college straight out of high school, it would take a full decade for me to ultimately decide to get back to school. In that time, I saw the world. I fell in love and learned how to know myself. My return to college looked nothing like my first attempt. I came back with a goal and a drive that would propel me to be a very successful student. Now, sitting here on the day of my convocation, I can look back retrospectively and identify what helped me to succeed. I'm a returned student with a decade of life in between my attempts at school, and that is not a weakness. In my experience, non-traditional students stand out in the classroom. We offer different perspectives and have unique views of the world that allow us to contribute to the discussions at hand. Of course, like with any population, we must avoid clumping these students together. Every non-traditional student has their own story and their own set of obstacles to overcome, but I think that a huge population of these students do have a shared experience. We all have the moment where we decided to go back to school, to work for something more in life, something greater that acts as fuel to propel us through our studies. I believe that we can look closely at these types of unifying experiences as a way to better understand whatever group we're engaging with. Give your students the opportunity to find their aha moment. Ask them to literally define why they are in your classroom, what motivates them, what's driving them to succeed. This is a move that will allow you to understand your students and will also allow them to start planting their own gardens of motivation. Challenge your students to really probe their minds to figure out what is propelling them and pay close attention to your students with non-traditional backgrounds. Some of my peer stories are so poignant that I can't help but be motivated by them. My own story won me a $100,000 four-year full ride scholarship and will probably get me another $200,000 scholarship that will put me through law school. Think about that. Because I've got my motivation and story so pinned down and so good at communicating, I'll graduate completely debt-free with a law degree. Especially for non-traditional students, these stories are priceless. Give your students the chance to hone their story. The closer they are to their true sources of motivation, the more it will propel them to their own greatness. It is truly empowering and has helped me build this amazing community that supports me regeneratively. Telling our stories also gives us a chance to celebrate our differences. While many of my peers and I have the shared experience of deciding we wanted more from our lives, that is often where the similarities end. In the nexus of every story is an individual, someone who has conquered their own dragons in life and has their narratives anchored in experience that you may never have. Learn from it. Invite your students to learn from each other. Our differences are what drive conversation and community. So what can you do in your classroom to support non-traditional students? I'll start by addressing my own personal elephant in the room. Due dates and strict attendance policies are ableist. I cannot count how many times I've been forced to be absent because the college's infrastructure does not support my broken-ass body. I cannot park somewhere where I have to hike to class. Attendance policies should be present and the importance of showing up should be highlighted, but enforce your policies compassionately. Invite conversation and open dialogue about what is going on. Offer Zoom rooms or ways to make up what was missed in that day's discussion. I don't benefit from losing a letter grade because there was no disabled parking that day. Strict adherence to due dates and attendance policies only serve to cheapen the actual education, which is obviously the goal of college. I'm a successful student who has been late on around 70% of my work because I've had compassionate professors who actually see the value of my work. I can tell you with absolute conviction that the professors who fixate on deadlines get the absolute worst of my work. Meanwhile, professors who are willing to work with me get projects that have heart and soul in them. Students like me who return to college are there for a reason. We consciously choose to get back into school and we're working towards accomplishing something. I hope you can see the value in cultivating a classroom where all students can thrive together as a community. Thank you for your time.
Hi, so my name is Katie Henderson, and I am a senior at the University of Utah, double majoring in anthropology and writing and rhetoric. I'm a non-traditional first-generation transfer student. I'll be 45 years old this year, and if I'm lucky, I'll graduate with both my degrees before I'm 46, just before the last of my children graduates from high school. I first enrolled in college not long after my first child was born. It was sometime around the late 90s, so roughly a quarter of a century ago, before Wi-Fi, smartphones, 9/11, the housing crash, and the pandemic. Around the same time I started school, I actively sought out an entry-level position in the mortgage industry, an industry that didn't require a college degree, to support my family until I could finish college. In the years that followed, I would periodically start school and then stop out again for family, financial, and personal reasons. Flash forward, and I've now had a 25-year career in mortgages, but I still haven't graduated college. The mortgage business is feast or famine. If you want to stay gainfully employed, you have to take on more than you can ever actually accomplish. Because of this, you can't really succeed. You just have to choose every day how you are going to fail. As a non-traditional student, it has been much the same. With a full-time career, a full-time family, and a full-time job as a human being, there are physically not enough hours in the day for me to be even a part-time student. And so I choose every day how I am going to fail. How I'm going to fail at my job, how I'm going to fail as a mom, how I'm going to fail as a partner, and how I'm going to fail as a student. And I do fail all the time. And every day, or as many of them as I can manage, I get up and I keep going and I do what I can. But it's exhausting. I've had teachers say things like, in the real world, there are expectations and you have to be able to deliver on time. I really do understand that. Meeting my deadlines at work has often been what has prevented me from meeting my deadlines at school. I've had teachers tell me, maybe you just aren't in a position to be a student right now if you can't make school your number one priority. And I've wondered who can make school their number one priority and who should be excluded from getting an education because they can't. Even though I successfully, if unintentionally, built a career in mortgages, I love school. My passion is the humanities and social sciences, not finance. I always stopped out of school because of work and life obligations, and quite frankly, because I didn't know how to succeed in college. But I always came back because I desperately wanted an education and to be part of something I valued and excelled at as an individual, not only as a wife or a mother. Even so, it's being a mother that got me back into school this last time. It was 2018. My oldest child had graduated high school 2 years earlier, and she wanted to give college another go after struggling the first time around. She was nervous and overwhelmed, and I honestly didn't know enough to help her navigate the system, so I decided we would do it together. We went to the local community college together one day and we both enrolled. What kept me in school this last time was a summer bridge program where university writing courses were being taught at the community college I attended. These courses helped me to find my identity as a student and a writer. They gave me access to resources, community and mentorship, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. They got me asking questions. What if no one but me gets to decide whether or not it's a good time for me to be a student? What if I just have to keep showing up and then I am a student? Rather than school being a proving ground for whether or not I can make it in the real world, what if my real world life experience can help inform my education, my research, and the education and research of the students and teachers around me? What if I don't have to work to catch up with other students, good students, students from a better background than me? What if my background and life experiences already bring something of value to the conversation? Over the years, my continuing connection with this program has helped me to see how education can be an invigorating, restorative, life-affirming experience, an experience that I feel all people should have access to for their own personal growth, but also so they can bring it back with them to their families and communities and forward into the world. College shouldn't be a barrier. It shouldn't be punitive. It should be wide open and full of possibility. College shouldn't be a proving ground. It should be fertile ground, planted with ideas and experiences of all kinds and nourished with curiosity, compassion, optimism, and goodwill. By bringing awareness to the diverse identities and backgrounds we all bring to higher education, hopefully we can work together to make it so. Thank you.
All right. Well, in a lot of ways, I think what Katie just said should be the mic drop end of this talk. But we want to make sure that we have plenty of time for conversation with you all. So we'll close by sharing some questions that we found ourselves continuing to grapple with as we drafted, discussed, and revised this talk. So I'll throw these out there, and we don't have to talk about these at all if you all have other things that you'd like to discuss, but these are the things we haven't resolved. So when are course policies and assessment practices in WAC-WID courses ageist in ways that undercut transfer students' opportunities for learning? How can WAC-WID courses and programs become mechanisms for equity for transfer students, particularly older transfer students, given the ways their educational experiences have often already been shaped by classism, racism, gender inequities, and ableism? How do we create opportunities for older transfer students to draw on their rich lived experiences with a range of discourses, while also recognizing these students might have had fewer opportunities than non-transfer students to encounter disciplinary and professional discourses, particularly when they first arrive at universities? And then what would it mean to create writing experiences across the curriculum that are restorative rather than depleting, particularly for older transfer students who are deeply motivated to learn, but are doing so within real, often inequitable material conditions? And with that, we would love to talk with you for the remainder of our time.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments or feedback, feel free to unmute or put it in the chats, or if you want to be called on, you can raise your hand as well.
I would just like to say thank you for to all of you. One of the things that I heard that I really liked is that transfer, meaning the literally the physical movement of transfer from one location to the next, is actually this opportunity that we need to capitalize. It's like I think of it in this way about international teaching assistants sometimes, where translation is an opportunity. It's a way to move from one location, one thought process to another. So I really appreciated that idea as actually a sort of a theoretical as well as material way to access some of the material that you presented for us today. I don't know if that's not really a question. It was more a comment, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about that. About just the opportunities that come from the idea and the physical movement of transfer.
I'll just say I'm happy to talk to any of y'all at any time, but I know you have limited time with my student co-presenters, so I would rather have them talk as much, and I can catch up with other people later. I will just say that I think this became kind of like our guiding principle with the bridge classes we developed, is at least, and especially like 8 years ago, I felt like what I was hearing from the institution was a lot of sort of deficit oriented, like remediation language about transfer students. Like, how do we quote unquote catch them up? Or how do we like there was this sense that like of an inherent like lack of preparation. And I mean, at a gut level, I really resisted that, but also it just didn't hold up in a lot of the research that we were doing. And so part of what we were really trying to do was reframe the conversations even within our institution about, hey, actually, this is this opportunity that non-transfer students don't have. And we can take this moment, and if we're sort of thinking about it metacognitively, if we're thinking about it as this opportunity to reflect, if we're thinking about it as a moment where students might be afraid or anxious, and we can be communicating like, hey, actually, like, we have all this evidence that you were bringing so much that because you're transfer students, and then construct courses that really made that something that could be explicit and reflective and an opportunity to carry knowledge forward and transform it, while also being pretty critical of the structures that students are transferring into in many cases. Kind of that, like, as my partner often says, the problem is not in here, the problem is out here. And I think we talk about that in a lot of the bridge classes as well. But I would love to have my co-presenters speak to this too.
Maybe just as a follow-up to my question and to your response, thank you, Christie, is the idea that writing is one of the mechanisms for the bridge, for the transfer. That's I don't think that that's a usual way to think about that, and I loved it somehow that the bridge is made out of writing opportunities. I wonder if any. Yeah, thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think one thing that Professor Toth has been really successful with about integrating transfer students into the new space is like actually going out and into their communities and saying like, we can write here too. For example, like I took the bridge course that was at Slick, and it was in my neighborhood that I grew up in. In one of Professor Toth's class, we went down to the writing center downtown Salt Lake in the library, where we hang out, where we go to socialize or to study or to read. So I thought that was really cool, a way to bridge all the communities together into the university, just by putting out into the communities that we already exist in. So that was a nice little buffer for me, and it also was a good way to show that you can bring your writing from the college to the community. It goes both ways.
I really love what Derek said at the end there about how you bring the college to the community, because there's I'm technically in organizational communication right now, even though I work in writing centers and probably will for the rest of my life if I have it my way. But there's a piece from a comm scholar in the 70s that's just bashing universities because they were established to help their communities and to work with their communities. And then with the GI Bill that happened after World War II, it was, about helping the communities again and the veterans and all that. And it's, become an ivory tower. It got that metaphor for a reason. And I think transfer students and people who have that built-in stronger bridge already of the community and the college that they're bringing in, and not, like students are almost like little satellites on campus of just being in the campus world. Like transfer students have all that value they can bring to us. I'm also a little biased because I'm a transfer student too. But actually, while I'm unmuted, I'm gonna ask about something that I've left comments as y'all were all talking through your document. They're all things I loved. I'll go back in and see if I can give anything else. But each of your stories was so unique to me because it acknowledged the challenges in a vulnerable way and was also showing how you overcame it in a way that's getting away from this. Oh, I'm so sorry, Katie. I will stop.
No worries at all. I was just going to say kind
Oh,
of what
yeah.
you had been saying before, that I think that as far as like I had to kind of write my way through to realizing that I didn't have to go anywhere to get to where I was. Like I was already who I was. I was already a student. I was already a grown up. I already had, like you were saying, connections to my community and to life, real world experiences. And I think that I just kind of always felt like I missed something, like I missed some steps, like I missed some experiences. And I think that for me, in writing through and processing some of the issues that I had growing up and some of the things that I didn't have, to kind of prepare me for where I was going, as I wrote through those things, I realized, well, yeah, I didn't have the same background. I didn't come from the same place. I don't have the same, quote unquote assets, but I have all of these other things. And I really do belong here, even if it doesn't look the same way as, the standard traditional student looks. But that happened through writing. I think you were kind of talking about that. And then Ms. Bushnell was also talking about that it's something that I couldn't just have those conversations with people. I had to have these assignments. I had to write about myself and my experiences. I had to write about school and how I felt about, like where I was at as a writer. How did I feel about it? How did I engage with it? And that's kind of what got me to that place. Like it's kind of like when you sit down to write a paper, write a conference, write a talk, you don't really know where you're going to end up until you just sit down and write it. And that's what had to happen.
Before I continue, if anyone else wants to jump off of that, please.
Yeah, I can add something to this idea of like belonging, where I think that's really poignant. The fact is that like, and I want to talk about the ivory tower too that you're talking about, Macy. I believe the fact that I just exist whenever I walk into a classroom, the fact that I'm there is like challenging the ivory tower. I limp into the classroom, I sit down, I'm non-traditional. By all means, I shouldn't be there. Definitely shouldn't be in law school. And I think just like existing and saying like I do belong and this is something that where I should be challenges the concept of this ivory tower. Because like if it was in fact an ivory tower, how could someone like me get into law school? So I think just like showing up and then telling your transfer students that not only do they belong, but they're so important to be here, to have differing viewpoints, differing experiences in the classroom, and then just like kind of allowing us to exist in that space with our experiences is important. And I think like throughout my undergraduate, I wrote a bunch of essays and I do well with essays, but a large portion of my assignments were recorded music. I call them lyrical essays, where I do raps or I do songs and like bring my experience into the classroom to say like it doesn't all have to look like a paper. Like you don't have, it can be something else. You can express yourself through your experiences. And I think that's important too.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Derek was saying, and a little bit of what Katie and Macy were both saying. That like I agree that I think transfer students bring a lot to universities, especially like non-traditional transfer students, because I feel like in some ways like we're being exposed to this different academic setting, but I also feel like the traditional students there are kind of being exposed to us. Like they're getting new perspectives, they're getting to read what we're writing, they're kind of broadening their own knowledge of kind of how the world works from a perspective they may have not had. So
I can maybe just throw in there too that I mean to Tabitha's point, we've got a number of students that we call like honorary writing studies scholars who were not transfer students but are non-traditional in other ways. They're BIPOC or older or just did not feel like they belong at a predominantly white institution in a variety of ways, who like just hang out with the transfer students because they found that was a community that's like more diverse and is in some ways I think like the center of the community in our department at this point. Like 60% of our majors are transfer students, almost all of them from Salt Lake Community College, not everybody, but so like it's actively beneficial for students who are marginalized in other ways to this more ways of being in our spaces, and it's so valuable and important.
Well, actually, the question I was going to ask was technically already answered by what Katie and Tabitha were saying, because I just wanted to know, more about the process of writing these pieces, because I'm doing some autoethnography right now, and the part I struggle most with is, I've written out this experience. Now I've got to, put in what it's offering, what it's doing, what this means. And I could see that coming through so strongly in what y'all had written, that it wasn't just, here's what happens to me, but there's so much meaning imbued with this experience and what I'm trying to say and what other people can get from it. And as someone trying to do autoethnography, it was really encouraging to read how you guys have put these pieces together to show how much academic conversation is happening without needing to have a source in there. So that was super cool to read. And
I
if
went-
anyone would like to talk about that process, go for it.
I was just wondering, just maybe to jump on what Macy was saying, and what kind, and Derek, you mentioned this too, I think, what kind of spaces are actually available to you? Are you talking about, so when you were talking about going to the library, I love that idea, you know, to take a class and just hang out at the library and have a different kind of association with your writing and with your fellows. Are there other spaces that were important to you, or was it mostly classroom space, or were there other aspects to the spaces that you found in your writing journeys here, if you will?
I can speak on that one because I think that my bridge course that I took with Christie over the summer, last summer, what she did is allowed us to be in these groups for the entirety of the course. And we chose these groups at the very beginning, and those groups really became a core. I'm still friends with a lot of them even today, and we hang out on campus, and it's a connection that I have that maybe otherwise I would not have had. In that space, we would choose when we would meet once a week for about an hour, and all of us chose to meet at Salt Lake Community College for an hour on campus, just kind of sitting in the grass over the summer, just talking about everything we're going through, what we don't understand, helping each other out. So having that dynamic as well was very helpful. And I'm still continuing with those friendships even today. And we've taken a lot of courses together too. Sometimes we'll look to each other because we have that shared experience of transferring and taking a bridge course from wherever we're coming from to where we are now. So having that space as well was really nice. Something non-traditional that's not just the classroom. It's outside of that classroom that also allowed us more time, like if you have time on the weekends, which I usually have more time on the weekends, but I have a child that tags along with me that I can take to these spaces, and they'll be accepted and they can run around and I can find time to do my own thing too.
Katie, I don't know, maybe you could talk a little about the study groups too, huh? Because we didn't really talk about it in the talk, but I know that's been important for some folks.
I
at
was
least.
totally going to. I didn't want to hog all the time, but yeah, I was totally going to bring up the study groups. So I would say that the most important spaces for me were probably actually at the Slick campus in the classroom. The sense of belonging, the people I met there. Like I went from being really nervous to feeling really safe in that space. And I think it's because there were so many different people represented there. So like I saw other people like me there, and it increased like just my confidence level and sense of belonging. But then a bunch of those people also transferred around the same time that I did up to the U. And so we started doing, we had kind of come up as a group with the idea of doing these study groups, and there were 4-credit study groups. And we would meet, originally it was almost entirely in person. I think the pandemic, we started kind of meeting online, and then it became kind of an online thing. And I think it's kind of in flux right now, but in person, those were some really amazing times because we got together at the U of U library. We got together at the Salt Lake Public Library, which is just this amazing piece of architecture and just right downtown in a really awesome spot in and of itself. A very inspiring space to be learning in and to be students in together. And so, I think we just kind of took this community with us. We had some other spaces that we met in, like for the like our board that we have for writing studies scholars. And so a couple meetings that we had there, and we just see the same faces in these different places. But the study group was really, really cool because we would get together at just whatever times worked for people. We would get a room in the library at the U. We would meet up and we would all take a selfie, like as much as we could squish everybody in there and send it to Christie so she knew we were actually there. We would get a lot of studying done. We would get a lot of goofing off done. We would eat a lot of snacks. Sometimes people would take a nap on the floor. It was just a really great space to just be students. We would commiserate. We would talk about what we were struggling with. And, oh, have you had, this teacher in this issue? Have you had this project? And what were your ideas? Are you working on this project? I don't know what to do about this. So it's just a really great place to have support for like how to deal with financial aid stuff, how to deal with projects. Just even like I'm dealing with this with my kids. It was a really good space for that.
That is awesome. And I think both you and Samantha hinted at the fact that part of what makes education easier is when we let things other than education into our educational experience. We have to acknowledge that some people, have kids, and like having your kids involved is actually going to make it easier than trying to separate your kids for some people. But we are at the 1 o'clock mark for here, and our next presentation is at 1:15. Thank you all so much. We're going to have keep in mind a longer keynote speaker time next time, because I feel like we could have all kept talking to y'all for so much longer about this. It was so unique. And Christie was a wonderful mentor and deferred the time to you guys. So we will move on to our next and final presentation of the day. Thank you again so much to Christie Toth and Derek Woolley, Katie Henderson, Tabitha Fay, and Samantha Kivett for your time presenting at our keynote today. And our next session is our individual presentations. There are 2 presentations, but I think about 7 presenters. It will first be the leveraging writing support across diverse learning environments, a 3S understanding approach from Mosine Binsed, and then resumers in and beyond a writing intensive preparatory course, challenges, assets, and opportunities from Kendon Kurzer, Natasha J. Lee, Amy Macias-Stowe, Mary Herr, and Nieva Manello, both from California State University and the University of California, Davis. So take a quick break, and we will see you all at the next presentation.